All right, let's dive right into this explainer. For a lot of us, just hearing the phrase retirement drawdown is enough to trigger this creeping financial anxiety. We spend our entire adult lives working, saving, and investing, right? But then there is this massive psychological shift that happens when it's finally time to stop saving and actually start spending. The rules of the game completely change, and suddenly that finish line you've been sprinting toward, well, it can feel a lot more like the edge of a cliff. Picture this. You're lying awake at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat. It's an incredibly common scenario. You've spent decades diligently building up your nest egg, but the exact moment you leave the workforce, this terrifying new question pops up. How much can you actually withdraw each year without running out of money before you run out of time? It's literally the difference between lifelong security and constant anxiety. Getting this right is everything.
We actually saw this exact anxiety perfectly captured recently in a Reddit post by a 38-year-old with a family of 5. They've paid off a good chunk of their house, they built up a solid emergency fund, and yet they wrote that they feel totally behind. They're looking at these industry benchmarks, like having 3 times your salary saved by age 40, and feeling like they are coming up short, despite doing so much right. I mean, hitting a $200,000 milestone is massive. Yet, if you scroll through the comments section on that post, it's flooded with people in their 30s and 40s who still feel desperately behind. One person with $450,000 explicitly said they feel behind just from spending too much time scrolling through financial forums. It just goes to show that no matter what the number in your bank account is, the anxiety of the unknown haunts almost all of us. But as one brilliant commenter pointed out in that same thread, comparison is the thief of joy. Comparing your unique financial journey to a stranger on the internet is only going to drive you crazy, because everyone's circumstances are completely different. You literally cannot compare your Chapter 3 to someone else's Chapter 20. Your retirement needs, your health, your lifestyle, your safety nets, they are uniquely yours. It kind of reminds me of climbing a mountain. You spend decades pushing for the summit, accumulating that wealth. The climb is tough, for sure, but it's pretty straightforward. The descent, though, that drawdown phase, that is where the terrain gets incredibly tricky and where the real anxiety kicks in as you try to figure out how to navigate down without running out of supplies. Which brings us to part 1, the famous 4% rule. Let's unpack exactly what this baseline is. So, back in 1994, a financial advisor named William Bengen decided to test this out. He wanted to answer that terrifying 3 a.m. question, how much can I safely spend? He stress-tested historical market data spanning from 1926 all the way to 1976. Keep in mind, this period included horrific economic stretches, like the Great Depression and the severe stagflation of the 1970s. He wanted to find a withdrawal rate that would survive a 30-year retirement through the absolute worst market conditions imaginable. And honestly, what's really fascinating here is how simple the mechanics actually are. You calculate 4% of your total portfolio at the exact moment you retire. You take that dollar amount out in year 1 to cover your living expenses. Then for every year after that, you completely ignore the stock market and simply adjust that original withdrawal amount for inflation to keep your purchasing power steady. Let's look at the actual math because it makes it super clear. Say you've got a cool $1 million saved up. 4% of that is $40,000 for year 1. Now, let's say inflation runs at 3% that year. For year 2, regardless of whether your $1 million grew to $1.1 million or shrank down to $900,000, you simply bump that $40,000 up by 3%, taking out $41,200. It's totally disconnected from the daily market panic. The sheer beauty of this rule? It's the simplicity. It gives you a concrete, proven framework that provides, honestly, immense psychological relief. In early retirement, when you suddenly have all this free time and a giant pot of money, the temptation to overspend is huge. Having a concrete rule anchors your expectations and gives you a predictable income that fights off inflation. But let's move into part 2, modern blind spots, because here is exactly where the 4% rule starts to show its age today. Because, let's face it, reality rarely follows a straight line. Just like those rugged mountain peaks, real life is full of unexpected drops and climbs that a static percentage just cannot predict. A fixed rule assumes your life moves in a perfectly predictable line, and we all know that's definitely not how life works. The modern critiques of this rule are absolutely valid. A one-size-fits-all rigidity totally ignores fluctuating costs like sudden healthcare bills, investment fees, or taxes. Plus, Bengen originally planned for a 30-year retirement. Today, if you retire at 60 and live well into your 90s, a strict 30-year horizon might leave you totally exposed in your final, most vulnerable years.
Let's look at a practical example with Jan and Miguel. They retired at 62 with $900,000, and they wanted to travel extensively while they were still young and healthy. But they hit some major market turbulence early on. Because a rigid 4% rule offers absolutely no built-in mechanism to ramp withdrawals down when the market stumbles, their heavy early spending combined with a market drop seriously threatened their portfolio's longevity.
Luckily, you don't have to fly blind. Let's look at part 3, flexible withdrawal alternatives.
When you compare these two approaches side by side, the dynamic strategy is a total game changer. A rigid strategy is honestly like setting your car on cruise control and ignoring the fact that you are driving straight into a blizzard. Dynamic strategies, they let you put your hands back on the steering wheel so you can adaptively shift in response to what's actually happening around you.
First up is the guardrails method. I love this one because it's exactly like the thermostat in your house. You set upper and lower limits, usually around 20%. If your portfolio gets too hot because of a massive bull market, you can actually give yourself a raise. But if it gets cold during a recession, you temporarily tighten your belt. It's entirely self-correcting.
To see this in action, take Olivia. Her $850,000 portfolio took a hit during a bear market and dropped below her preset lower guardrail. So what did she do? She dynamically dropped her spending from $34,000 to $28,000 by temporarily trimming her travel budget. No panic, just a pre-planned, rational adjustment that protected her capital until the market bounced back.
Then we have time segmentation, which is often called the bucket strategy. This naturally buffers you against market crashes by completely separating your immediate cash needs from your volatile long-term stocks. Think about it. If the stock market crashes tomorrow, you don't even care because the money you need for groceries for the next 3 years is sitting totally safe in your short-term cash bucket.
Another fantastic option is the floor and upside approach. The idea here is to secure your absolute essential living expenses like housing and food entirely with guaranteed income, like Social Security or a pension. That's your floor. Then, any money you pull from your investments is strictly for the upside, vacations, hobbies, the fun stuff. If the market dips, you just travel a bit less, but your core survival is never threatened.
And hey, if you're a data nerd who wants the ultimate flexibility, there's always Monte Carlo simulation software. David and Priya use this to run thousands of potential future market scenarios. It recalibrates their exact safe spending limit every single year. So instead of a flat 4%, they confidently shift their spending anywhere between 3.2 and 4.6%, totally optimized for whatever the economy is doing right now. At the end of the day, your retirement descent shouldn't be dictated by an outdated rule of thumb. It requires a custom blend of these adaptive strategies tailored precisely to your own health, your goals, and your risk tolerance. The 4% rule is an amazing piece of historical scaffolding, but you deserve a custom-built house. So I'm going to leave you with this. What will your personalized withdrawal strategy be? And isn't it time to finally build a plan that lets you sleep peacefully at 3 a.m.? Your numbers are yours alone. Build the flexible guardrails you need, run your own race, and reclaim the joy of the wealth you've worked so incredibly hard to build.